Coming up in this episode.
I feel like the important thing for us was to have fun with it, not treat it overly serious. Yeah, when it came time for particularly the pro gamers to have their go at it, it was worth a fair bit of money to them to win. So we wanted to make sure that we took it seriously enough that we weren't just, taking the mickey.
We talk V8 Supercar iRacing with Chad Neylon, and we look at the Australasian Championship for Formula One drivers.
How good would this be? How good would it be to get all the leagues together, or as many of them as we can fit? We can sort of match off on the racetrack and get the leagues and their members behind it, supporting it.
Welcome along to episode 2 of Sim Stuff, proudly brought to you by Player One Sim Gear. And a very big hello, everybody. Welcome along to episode number 2. Firstly, apologies that there's been such a big delay. Unfortunately, IRL has got in the way, but we are back bigger, better and stronger than ever before, and we'll be putting out a ton more podcasts over the upcoming months. And boy, oh boy, though, Neil, I've got to tell you, for a comeback, this is absolutely going to be a ripper of a program today. Hello and welcome to you.
G'day, mate. Very good to be back indeed. And you're right, it's I guess super relevant at the moment. There's lots happening in the world of motor racing. Obviously, we've got the fashion shows happening over this week and last week with the reveal of all the new liveries coming out on the fancy new Gen 3 cars in the V8s. And then all the Formula One liveries are being released as well this week, I've seen.
And speaking of V8 Supercars, today on the program, we're going to catch up with Chad Neylon, who's the V8 Supercars series commentator for iRacing. And it's no great surprise, Neil, that he's just like us, a tragic gamer as well.
Mate, I love it. He works absolutely, I guess, perfectly for all of us diehard race fans who imagine that we are, in fact, racing in real life while occupying our sims and spending time beating each other up on virtual tracks around the world.
And we're not going to miss out on Formula One racing too. You've been doing a fair bit of work and you've come up with an extraordinary interview for us.
Yeah, so really stoked. We've got Steve joining us from the Oceania F1 Invitational, which is a cross-league event. So for those of you who don't follow the Formula One game platform, one of the biggest, I guess, developments in the game in a long time was the arrival this year of crossplay. And what Steve and the team have done is they've put together an event to bring together the very best racers. Think of it as the Top Gun of Formula One racing in Australia and New Zealand. It's the best of the best from a number of different leagues, or 10 different leagues, across Australia and New Zealand, across multiple platforms, all coming together to battle it out to see who's best and which league can win bragging rights. So we're stoked to be supporting that and stoked to be talking to Steve about that today.
Well, I'm really excited about today's podcast. So what says we put our foot on the clutch, pop it in first gear, get the revs up, and let's get underway. Well, Neil, it is time to talk V8 Supercar racing in iRacing. And I first met this guy way back when he was doing drag racing commentary over in Perth. He came on board with the V8 Supercars, was taken under the wings of Neil Crompton, and has made his way up through the calling ranks very, very successfully. And no great surprise when COVID hit and V8 Supercar racing went to iRacing that Chad was made chief commentator. He's a tragic gamer just like the rest of us and has a passion for the product. He joins us on the line now. Chad, thanks very much for joining us. Let's start off by asking, how did you get involved?
Oh man, it feels like a few years ago now. When was the first one we had? I think 2018 was year one for us. Actually, predating that, 2017, we had a one-off night at Bathurst. I think it was maybe the Friday night leading into it, and we had a bit of a pro-am set up using Xbox, and I think it was Forza, maybe Forza 5 or something like that. And we had a full live setup with Sims, and then we had gamers go in and do a few laps, and then the actual Supercars drivers. And it was cool because I had a live studio audience feel. It was in a garage. It was at Bathurst. It was the weekend of the Bathurst 1000, and that's sort of where it started. And I feel like from Supercars' point of view, they wanted to get involved in the rise of online racing, and they didn't really have their own platform, but they had an avenue via what was then Forza, and then eventually iRacing to get Supercars out there in a way. So because I've always sort of been into it and I've always been a gamer, it made sort of sense to get me on there. I commentate the other support categories anyway, so we sort of treated it just like any other support category, if that makes sense.
We'll talk about your gaming experience in a few moments' time. I know Neil's got a couple of questions on that. But the one thing I wanted to ask is, way back in the days when I used to work with V8 Supercars, Mark Howard and I used to have to go on track and we'd take V8 Supercar drivers up and they would race against punters in sim racing. And the drivers, Craig Lowndes and Mark Winterbottom were the two that we used predominantly. They'd come back and say, my goodness, these guys are good. This is scary. Is it still like that at the moment from the eSeries perspective?
I feel like it is, but the gap got a lot closer during COVID. So once upon a time, a lot of these guys really didn't have any idea about how to race on a sim. But then 2020 came along and the whole world stopped, the supercars stopped. And so all of a sudden, every single one of those guys on the grid for the Supercars Championship had to get themselves a sim set up at home and compete on iRacing. And being Supercars drivers, they obviously got super competitive, so it had to get pretty serious pretty quick. And so there was some guys like, Van Gisbergen, Brody Kostecki, Scott McLaughlin, Anton De Pasquale. They were probably the best four in terms of being fast. But I feel like if you had gone, in 2019, compare the average Supercars driver to a guy who's pretty handy on iRacing, the gap would have been massive, but that gap has definitely got a lot closer in the last couple of years.
And Neil, I can tell you that Van Gisbergen, he like, if you had two skateboards, he'd want to race you. Like, the guy can race anything.
Right, it's race car drivers through and through, isn't it, I think? Yeah. So I'm interested, Chad, there's always been a perception, or I think an awareness, that simulator time was a real thing in Formula One. Formula One drivers would spend a lot of time doing testing in simulators, prior, or I guess in addition to their track work. Is that more the case now in the supercars? Has that always been the case in the supercars, and is it more so now?
I'd say definitely more so now. It's picked up in recent years, particularly with how readily available good equipment is, and then also the fact that there are most of the Aussie tracks on particularly Assetto Corsa and R-Factor. The tracks that you'd find on iRacing are really just Bathurst and Sandown and Winton now, but until recently there hasn't been a lot of Aussie tracks on iRacing. But guys like Tom Randall, who's a regular in the Supercars paddock, they use quite a lot of sim time. I know the teams have invested in getting some pretty serious sim setups. Walkinshaw and Andretti United have a good setup. Erebus have a pretty handy one. Shelby Power Racing and maybe Red Bull. I'm not too sure. Actually, I don't think Triple Eight have got one. But a lot of these teams have actually really upped the setups that they have as well. And then they're able to also use that as a tool for junior drivers to come through the ranks, promising them more sim time. And it's not quite to the elite level that you'd find in Formula One, but it's still an important element of warming up for any race that these guys go to. So they're doing a lot of laps, particularly around Adelaide, because no one's been there for 2 years right now. So
of course,
it'd be crazy to not try and use a sim to just get a bit of that muscle memory back.
Does Clemenco let you have a go at their sim?
I haven't had a go on it. I've had a look in there. Is it a SimWorks setup, that one? I'm trying to remember exactly what they've got there. It's bloody impressive, though. I think I may have been in there when Brody or Will Brown was having a go on it. Brody in particular is very good. But it's a very cool setup.
Now, tell us about your sim racing career, because you don't just commentate, you've been involved in it and still involved in iRacing at the moment. But where did the sim racing experience begin for you?
Oh, man. I think Super Nintendo would have been the console. I reckon it would have been Nigel Mansell's Formula One World Championship, doing laps around Interlagos at Brazil over and over and over and over and over, because I loved it. And then that turned into eventually getting a PlayStation. This is PS1, so we're talking mid-90s here. And I got it was like a game which was just for the Andretti's. I'm trying to remember what it's called. But it was like a Michael Andretti racing sort of thing. And I had the original Mad Catz steering wheel and pedals for it. So it was like a steering wheel and pedals for PlayStation 1. And I'd turned it into like a little set. I would have been 11 years old. I've turned it into like a little racing cockpit and everything like that. Totally amateur compared to what you see today with these amazing sim setups. Most of them have movement and all sorts of stuff. But mine was pretty relaxed. Like these days, I've got a really cool Thrustmaster wheel with load cell pedals, and also GT Ultimate, seat chassis set up with this handbrake and shifter. Like compared to what I started with back in the 90s, like it's just light years apart.
Now, the V8 eSeries is on iRacing, and I'm really interested to know your co-commentator, Garth Tander, is somebody I've got a lot of time for and I've known for many, many years. His knowledge of all types of racing is second to none. How does he feel, and how do you feel, that the eSeries compares to the main game?
It's a good question. I feel like the important thing for us was to have fun with it, not treat it overly serious. Yeah, when it came time for particularly the pro gamers to have their go at it, it was worth a fair bit of money to them to win. So we wanted to make sure that we took it seriously enough that we weren't just, taking the mickey, but we wanted to have fun with it. We wanted to be able to crack some jokes with it so that the broadcast itself was fun and then the racing itself could actually be entertaining. Probably you just see more crazy stuff happening, particularly when you've got the actual supercars drivers doing it, because they don't have the level of quality that the gamer guys have. So, yeah, they're always wrecking each other and stuffing pit stops and doing basic stuff, which is actually quite funny. Particularly back in the first, what was then the BP Ultimate Supercars All-Stars. Remember that one in COVID? And it was just huge. Like it was like the only sport on TV at one point, literally the only sport on TV. And it was just like unmissable because it was so funny every night. They're having these big races on ovals and giant crashes, and it was just fun. So we've tried to keep a bit of that element going today, but the actual racecraft and the wheel-to-wheel stuff, I mean, the intensity with those guys who know what they're doing is very similar to the intensity at the front of the field in a real supercars race.
Well, I came out of retirement some time back to call a league race, a Formula One league race. And I was absolutely stunned as a former commentator at how similar and how excited you can get about league racing, compared to the real world. I thought they'd be worlds apart. How have you found it?
I love calling it. And for me, it's all the same things that a real race has. It's got, the competition, the points, battles, prizes, all that stuff is still there. The prestige of winning a championship, all that stuff still exists. And from a commentary point of view, I'm still preparing the same way. There's still bios on who are the athletes, or in this case, the virtual athletes. Where are they from? What makes them tick? What's their story? And for their world, they've got full-time jobs. They've got lives away from the track. So it's actually quite interesting. And then also they've got a little bit of real racing experience as well. A lot of them are in karting. One of the guys, Cooper Webster, races S5000s. So there was actually quite a good mix of real world experience there. Actually, here's a fun fact for you that we figured out at the end of the Cash Converters eSeries this year. There was more national champions racing in the pro ranks than there was in the actual Supercars All-Stars field. Because we had Jordan Caruso, national sports sedan champion. Like there were guys in there. I think there was 2 or 3 of them. I forget them all off the top of my head, but there's actually quite a lot of real-world racing champions in there. So what it has done recently is help close the divide between, guys who just want to have a crack on a sim and then also getting them on a racetrack for real, which is one of the real things that I love about it. So there's that element of it as well. But yeah, from a commentary point of view, absolutely, it's the same for me. Like it might not be as high stakes as the last lap of a Bathurst 1000, but it's still a race and it's still competitive.
Yeah, Chad, something that always fascinates me is you obviously see a lot of the, as you mentioned then, the transfer of the existing racing drivers moving into the sim world, because there's a natural skills fit that way. Are you seeing a skills fit going the other way? Are you seeing actual race teams starting to take interest in sim drivers and drivers who are coming from the sim world?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that was really cool about this year's Cash Converters eSeries was actually giving those guys a chance to get into the supercars paddock. So it was providing them with opportunities to break down a few walls and barriers into the supercars world. Like Jordan Crusoe, a guy that I mentioned a moment ago, he's gone from being a guy who races at home doing V8 scops and things like that And now all of a sudden he's hanging out in the Tickford garage at an actual race meeting, or he's going to the workshop. He's meeting with Tom Randall and, actual race car drivers. And it's all come about through iRacing and through the Supercars eSeries. Now, are we ever going to get to a point where, a Supercars team boss is going to, just ring up one of these kids like Josh Rogers, who's the best we ever saw here in Australia, and offer them a ride in the real world? I don't know about that, but they are offering them, like, say, Brad Jones, for example. He'll give his eSeries drivers an evaluation day in a Super 3 car at Winton as a prize. Like, that's pretty cool stuff.
That's
like
awesome.
that's extremely cool for a team boss to be giving gamers that sort of opportunity. So, are they going to turn into a Supercars champion? Maybe not, but it is giving them a chance to go from grassroots racing, from virtual racing to at least grassroots racing. And I'm not saying it's going to rival go-karting, but it's at least another way into motorsport other than just go-karting, which is obviously, forever getting more and more expensive. So it's almost another cost-effective way of getting people involved in motorsport, which is definitely not a bad thing.
And it also shows that the team managers like Brad Jones and the others up and down pit lane are watching.
Absolutely. Oh, man, Brad was texting me on the night of the final, being like, because we were sort of goading on a little bit, being like, oh, let's hope Brad gives this guy a drive for real. Surely enough, the phone lights up. Brad's watching. He's just watched his driver win a championship, and he goes, yep, he'll be getting a drive at Winton. Don't worry about it. Like, same with Ryan Walkinshaw. Ryan Walkinshaw's for starters, he's a huge gaming fan, but he wanted to have the best team on the grid, and so he did. For the first 3 years, they were untouchable. They won every race, every championship, and they were looking to get the best, iRacing drivers in their team. And it was actually quite competitive for those guys to make sure that they were getting the best drivers. So they were treating it very seriously, and absolutely they were watching. We
know in the real world, because the cars are so similar, the real V8 Supercars we're talking about here, the competition is absolutely extraordinary. It's only the most minute mistake that can send you from pole position to being outside the top 10. Have you found that throughout the last season that it was exactly the same in the eSeries?
Absolutely. I mean, qualifying in particular was quite tight. Not so much in the All-Stars where it was a big spread of, probably 3 to 5 seconds of lap time across, at Bathurst, for example. I think, say Brody Kostecki, for example, was doing a 2:03 around Bathurst, which is crazy. And then the back markers in the All-Star field were probably doing 2:07s, 2:08, so about 5 seconds across the field. And then the pro guys would roll out for their qualifying session, and the entire field's covered by 1 second comfortably. Wow. It was really tight. And that was Bathurst, a track which is over 6Ks long. So if you were to take them to a smaller racetrack, we're talking about tiny, tiny little increments around Winton, for example. If you were 3 or 4 tenths off pole, you were outside the top 10. So it was just like you'd see in the real world, absolutely.
Neil?
It's amazing. I don't know how they do it. It's I'm just starting out in iRacing and playing in the V8s, just trying to keep those things pointing the right way and going around the corners as they're supposed to is a challenge. Yeah,
it's tough, isn't it, on iRacing? And you find yourself just wanting to turn on auto blip and a few of the other just little features to help you out just a little bit, because they are so tricky to drive. And then, I'd challenge anyone to get on iRacing, have a crack in a supercar around Bathurst. And if you can get it under a 2:10, you're actually doing all right. And you're going, where the hell are these guys finding 7 seconds on that? It's I think that's ultimately why I gradually moved over towards doing the ovals. You're never going to be that far off on an oval straight away. It was more about the racecraft. But for the guys who knew what they're doing on even the MX-5 series and things like that, when you first join up, I was just way off it.
And I wonder from the racing experience, I know that having driven a V8 supercar myself, the first time you go out on cold tyres, you're thinking, what the hell have I got myself into? This thing handles like a block of flats. Is the game version of the V8 supercar similar?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly on cold tyres. The out lap will be the most difficult lap you ever do in a supercar. Just trying to get around to start a flying lap at Bathurst is tricky enough if you're sort of new to it, because they just have a propensity to lock a tyre or instantly break into tire smoke the second you try and put your foot on the throttle. They feel awkward. They're not, even if you are turning it like using the paddles, it still feels a bit strange. Like that, it's not as easy as just driving around in a sort of a GT or anything like that.
Yeah, the understeer gets me every time on the outlap.
Oh yeah, just trying to get the thing to turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just almost willing it to turn every time you get to turn 2. It's like, oh, come on, please. You just feel like it's burning at the time.
Even with warm tyres, the real deal's a bit like that too from time to time. So where do you think, like, I know it's hard to look into a crystal ball and there's a lot of variables that come into this, but where do you see the V8 Supercar eSeries going in the future?
Don't know. I'd like to think that it can still maintain, the entertainment. I feel like it's now that we're back to the real world, well and truly, it's a big ask to expect the main drivers to be able to come and do it as regularly as they have. I'd like to see it used for other fun things as well, like bringing back the celebrity race that we had during COVID that night. That was a lot of fun. I know the people that were involved that night all wanted to be able to do it again. So maybe that's another way of doing it. Maybe for more one-off appearances as well. Like you'll have more of a chance of getting your SVGs or your Brody Kostecki's, all these guys who are pretty good at it, if they can just come and do it for a night instead of 6 or 7 nights back to back. And hopefully we're able to continue to keep that connection between guys who use iRacing and big-time supercars teams, because I think that's a really cool thing that our sport has. Another cool thing to do would be, I reckon, involve and get the Supercars Twitch page going as well on this, but have open sessions where if you're on iRacing, you can just go out there and do a few laps with an Anton De Pasquale or whatever. Like, we'll just, what it's like when you hop on iRacing and you find yourself in a session where it's like, holy crap, that's Shane Van Gisbergen out there. And you're sort of doing a few laps and you're like, it's pretty cool. I'm on a track with SVG. It'd be cool to see more of that sort of stuff happen as well, where supercars could, sort of like an autograph session in a way, but a virtual session where you're on track with these guys.
The funny thing is, with that, Chad, I hopped in an open lobby and a prominent Formula One esports racer came into the lobby, and I was so excited to see him I didn't make turn 1.
It would take them maybe 5 to 10 minutes to get over the fact that they're sharing the racetrack with someone cool, and then they could actually focus on hitting a few apexes.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I struggle to identify the rapid drivers because they're passing me at such a rate of knots. Yeah. It's just a blur as they zoom past. Yeah, absolutely.
But that'd be a cool way. I just think it's a great way of connecting fans of the sport to the stars of the sport, in a way that other sports can't.
I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head there. Real world racing has come such a long way in terms of that, providing that connection back to the drivers as well. Like, you watch the streams now, and even down to the in-car comms that they have with some of the drivers when they're on outlaps or on quali laps or in practice, and that ability for you to speak to the drivers while they were racing in the eSeries was fantastic, to actually hear real time what the drivers are thinking as they're going around.
Yep. Yeah, and there's no reason why you couldn't do that with them, chatting with fans, maybe not have it so it's, 5 million people in the lobby at once all trying to ask Dave Reynolds a question, but
sure.
At least break it into a few different people at a time. And they could even give a few tips, like Anton could be like, all right, guys, follow me around. I'll show you the quickest way to get around, I don't know, Daytona or Spa or wherever it is that you're doing laps that night. You don't even need to make it competitive. It can just be like a 1 hour practice session where everybody just hops in and cap it at 20, 30 cars or whatever and come and do some laps with those guys for a night.
He's another freak, David Reynolds. I mean, have you ever played tennis against him, Chad?
No.
Don't.
No,
Don't. He is so good. He's not dissimilar to Shane Van Gisbergen. I mean, these athletes, they're competitive. They're competitive at everything. And have you found that with the esports drivers? Have you found that that they cross-pollinate into other forms of iRacing and do equally as well?
With the actual gamers, or with
the gamers,
the supercars drivers? I haven't seen them get out into any other worlds yet. Like, I think they're so good at iRacing because it is their world. Like, that's what they specialize in. And to get to the level that they're at, you just have to be on it almost constantly as well. So I'd love to know what else they're good at doing, to be honest, because I feel like I'm not calling it one-trick ponies, but I feel like that's definitely their specialty, at least.
What would you do? What would you suggest to people that wanted to get involved in the V8 Supercar Esports Series? How would they go about it?
Well, there's actually a ton of different ways. Like, I know that they open up in the past. They've had drafts and things like that as well. So if you don't get hand-picked, say you're not, like a Josh Rogers or a Dane Warren, Jared Filsell, Madison Down, one of those guys who are first picked off the table when it comes to being signed up to a team. A lot of people can go via the draft where they can either win a few races, and then usually the sponsor teams like Cash Converters have their own team, or one of the other sponsors like BP Ultimate will have their own team, and then they can actually pick people out of the draft to drive in their teams. So that's one easy way of getting in there. But that's why I reckon the idea of doing something that connects just newbies or people on a rookie license or whatever to go do some laps with some of the pros or some of the actual supercars drivers would be a cool way of just introducing people to it as well.
Well, Chad, as we've said, the next season hasn't been officially announced. So probably the best way to find out for people is if they followed your socials. So give your socials a bit of a plug so that people can jump on board.
Sure. Very easy. It's my name, Chad Neylon. So you can't get that one wrong. So you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. That's probably where I do most of my work. My Twitch account has sat there dormant since COVID, pretty much. Which I'm very occasionally even on Discord, but I practically live on Twitter and Instagram. So you can follow me at Chad Neylon, and I'll always be sharing whatever Supercars eSeries stuff pops up along the way as well.
And just one final question for me to wrap things up. From a commentator's perspective, what is the biggest pro? What's the thing that you love about the eSeries the most?
Well, in COVID, I loved it because it was a chance to get out of the house, for one. Like, genuinely, I looked forward to those, I think, Wednesday nights they were back then, like counting down the minutes. It was like, God, can I please go now? Because they were so much fun to be a part of. And then we had a different iteration of it where we were hosting it out of the Fox Footy studios in Melbourne. So we had a genuine, it might have been virtual racing, but the TV product was very real.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably what I enjoy most of all, is we have a really tight TV team, most of which you'll remember, Boydo, from back in the days.
Is Nathan doing it? Is Nathan doing the direction of that?
He was. He's recently left, sadly, but all through COVID, he was the main guy. And he wasn't just doing the direction, he was also race director as well. So he was, and jumping in and out of chat rooms on Discord and Zoom and directing people over here.
That's Nathan Prendergast.
That's Nathan right there. Like we had Lando Norris racing, we had Max Verstappen racing with us. Like, it was absolutely huge in that moment. So I'd say for me, the fact that the TV product that we bring is very real. And I like to think that particularly during the All-Stars eSeries and COVID, we brought a level of television that hadn't been really seen in eSeries or racing anywhere in the world, in any form of virtual racing. Like even the Formula One product, I feel like we competed with what F1 were able to bring, particularly the fact that every driver had a camera on them. We could speak to them like you guys were talking about earlier, Neil. Like, it just added another element to it. We brought in all of the qualities of Supercars broadcasting and brought it into virtual racing. And I feel like that was something that hadn't been seen before. So for mine, it was the fact that we could, my favorite thing about it was bringing real TV nous into virtual racing and making it look professional. Yeah. And in doing so, hopefully building a bit of a fan base for it.
Mate, seeing it on KO, it's like one of those moments you remember when you're just roaming through KO one night or whatever, and you come across iRacing. It's crazy, and it's so good.
How many people, Neil, do you reckon flicked on the TV in the last 2 years, and it took them at least 20 to 30 seconds to realise they weren't watching real Supercars?
100%. Yeah, definitely.
That's how good it looked. Had the same graphics, the same, when Crompo was calling it, the same voices. And in a lot of the cases, the liveries and the cars all look the same. It was the fact that, hang on a minute, are they racing at Monza? Why is Supercars at Monza? Before you even realise that it's like, wait a minute, It's not real.
I know. Hey, Chad, I've got to ask you. So, the Player One SimGear Twitter is signed on to you. We're following you now as well. So we'll be retweeting a lot of your stuff, so our followers can find you through us. But one of the tweets I saw is the crossover from perhaps the other way around, from gaming into real world. What did you think of Ross Chastain in the NASCAR?
That's a good way of putting it, because it was everyone said at the time it was the video game move, wasn't it?
Mate.
I just can't believe that works.
Grant, did you see that move?
No, I didn't.
All right, I've got to show it to you. So Ross Chastain, basically, he needed to make the final four, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, in order to qualify, I guess like for the NASCAR playoff equivalent. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so it was the last race before the grand final, essentially. So and coming to the last lap, he needed to pass, I think, 2 cars to guarantee his way in.
Yeah.
And if he didn't pass those 2 cars, it was like, right, put on the trailer, you're done, sort of thing. And so he went full iRacing on the last lap.
Just amazing. He just put it into the wall, just dropped it into 5th gear, and just wall rode. They were destroying his car the whole way around, all the way around the outside of the pack in the last corner, and then got in by about like a metre or so to cross the line to where he needed to in the top 2.
Oh, crazy.
It rightfully broke the internet when I was watching it live at the time. I've got the NASCAR Track Pass app, which is up there with the best $130 I spend all year, because I just love watching NASCAR racing. And I was watching it live, and I just sort of had a bit of a like rub my eyes moment. I was like, did I just see what I think I just saw? So it was genuinely one of the more extraordinary things I've ever seen in a race.
Yeah, amazing footage. I've seen you. So check out our socials, the Player One socials. You'll see all the footage there. Anyone who hasn't seen that yet.
Excellent. And I actually want to fire up iRacing right now and just see if it can actually be done. I'm going to go and play Martinsville just so I can try it.
Yeah, keep us posted.
Hey, Chad, it's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you again. It's been a long time between drinks. Congratulations on your career. It just seems to go from strength to strength. And thank you for taking time out of your day, for so long too, we might add, to take us through the eSeries for V8 Supercars, and much success for the future with it.
No, thank you, mate. Thank you. It was cool to catch up once again. Have seen some racing, some virtual racing on Speed Week even as well. So cool to see Gran Turismo getting a run over there.
That's cool.
Once upon a time. Not that you and I have been on Speed Week for many, many years, but always cool to still know that it's chugging along.
Just for the listeners out there, Chad, myself, Nathan Prendergast, who directs the V8 Supercars, we all went through this place that produces the Speed Week show at some stage of the game as we learnt our craft, and Chad and Nathan Prendergast have kicked on to some pretty big things as well, including one of you'd remember, Chad, one of my Formula 3 cohorts back in the day. Michael Massey has gone back to V8 Supercar racing, which is absolutely fantastic. Tell you what, it's really good as an iRacer or as a league racer when I get into trouble with the FIA. Hey, Michael, what do you reckon I should put down for this? It's a bit of an unfair advantage, I've got to tell you. Buddy, great to catch up with you again, and thanks very much for your time.
Cheers, boys.
Right, up next we have Steve, also known as Slammer, who is from the Oceania Invitational, which is a new cross-league event being set up to compete the very best drivers across the Formula One leagues in Australia and New Zealand against each other. It's a fascinating concept, and it's made available by, I guess, the arrival of crossplay into the game platform. And yeah, we're really excited to be part of it and to be on board supporting. So Steve, take us through it.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here. Well, what can I say? Yeah, it's an idea I sort of woke up with one morning, in all honesty, and it was how do we get the community closer together? There's so many leagues, and we've all got our own communities, and we're all part of them. So how can we sort of bring everyone together in a common spot? And with crossplay coming in, I thought, how good would this be? How good would it be to get all the leagues together, or as many of them as we can fit? I didn't know many at the time, so all that I knew. Get them together and let's see if we can sort of match off on the racetrack and get the leagues and their members behind it, supporting it. And yeah, we had our first one in December, middle of December, and there were 9 leagues represented in that. We had one drop out really late. It was streamed across a couple of channels. It was way bigger than what I initially intended. So yeah, in my eyes, it was let's get the leagues together, and everyone can all watch the same thing. We found out that it was watched in Europe and in the States, and we had drivers at the time I sort of put it together were much bigger and better than what I would ever have imagined would participate. That's sort of the concept of it. A league v league race where the leagues themselves are the people that are effectively running it behind the scenes. And when I say running it, they provide all the ideas and the little bits and pieces about running a race. I'm not calling this a league because I really don't want to step on the toes. The leagues do their thing and they do it bloody well. I'm just sort of the let's call it the conductor, trying to get everyone together and
the special events
organizer. Race. Yeah, call it that if you like. Yeah.
So how does the concept work? Like, how do you choose the drivers from all the various leagues? How does the invitation get posted?
So the invitation is the league. So I'm inviting the leagues. I invite the league owners or the admins or whoever sort of running the show, for lack of a better word. It's up to the leagues though to choose their drivers and nominate their own drivers. So So they get to pick who they want to represent their league, 2 drivers and a reserve. Now, we know, there's many leagues and lots of communities out there. And I know, for example, of a driver I think he's involved or a member of 6 of the 8 leagues or 5 of the 8 leagues or 9 leagues that were in the race. So then it's up to the leagues to try and convince this guy, hey, race for us.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
And this guy's El Rapido as well, mind you. So, it was almost like a bit of a bidding war, I reckon, behind the scenes. But, yeah, entirely up to the leagues. It's up to them to choose the drivers that they want to represent their league on a pretty big stage.
Sure. Excellent. And so it's worth giving a bit of I guess context for our wider audience. So in the iRacing world, people often race as part of a league, but often as race teams, and the race teams will compete across multiple events and multiple leagues. In the Formula One platform, so the Codemasters Formula One platform, what you see is drivers tend to be affiliated more so to leagues rather than individual race teams, and then they'll race for constructors teams within those leagues, and they'll often compete in multiple events and then multiple sort of seasons going on with those leagues. So this is kind of the first time where we're seeing the individual leagues kind of being represented almost as race teams in a tournament format.
Yeah, I actually never thought of it that way, but yeah, you're spot on. So the leagues themselves being represented. Initially, the idea was for them to create their own custom liveries and really be truly represented in the race, during the race. We did find out there was a bit of an issue in regards to sharing pit boxes. We didn't know which team or which driver was sharing a pit box with who. If you're sort of running lower tiers, that's not so much of a problem, but when you've got the pointy end of the drivers in our region, I think it's a pretty important point. So, yeah, you're right. I don't know. I know where a league versus a league in a one-off race, 10v10 or whatever it may be, but yeah, I've never seen 10 leagues. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, okay. And crucially, so this has come together really with the launch of crossplay. So this year in the Formula One franchise, EA, or the old Codemasters, now EA, brought in crossplay to try and unite both the Origin with the Steam platform on PC, because oddly they couldn't race together, but then also the Xbox and PlayStation side of the world as well. So this is a true crossplay initiative, and you've got guys on controllers racing against guys with wheels and pedals.
Yeah, full crossplay. So we had every platform represented in the first race back in November. So every platform from Steam, Origin, the Xbox old and new series, and PS4, PS5, they were all represented in it. I'm not sure about controllers and wheels, but I'm assuming they would have been representation across both. But crossplay is probably the thing that's allowed us the opportunity to be able to really expand it and get the big boys. There's no mistaking. You're looking at the guy that won it in the first place, Ryan Bell. He's on PC. You would never get Ryan up against some of the quick PlayStation people that I know of, because I was originally a PlayStation person. Never get them against each other. it technically wasn't possible.
Sure.
There has been a bit of a stigma about crossplay, and perception is reality. I can tell you, I've tested the absolute crap out of it, both leading up to the first event and since then, owning both the PS4 and the PC. I don't have any issues. So I know that there's a massive perception about it being bad and it doesn't work and all the rest of it. To me, I haven't experienced that.
Okay, that's awesome. So what's the plan? When's the next event, and how can people tune in and get involved with it?
All right, so the next event is in the early planning stages now, but we have locked in dates and we have locked in a track. So the next event will be on the 1st of March, which is, it's only 3 weeks away, I think, 3 or 4 weeks away. We were at Silverstone for event 1. This time we are moving across and we're actually moving to Coda. And there's a bit of a reason for Coda. It's because every time I've watched someone race there in the higher tiers of the PSGL and WOR, it's always had the most exciting racing. So I think it's going to be a cracking track for the top guys. It will be streamed live on Twitch. We've set up a separate Twitch channel to get the stream out to the masses. It's called Oceania F1 Invitational because we are still inviting leagues. And it'll be 7:30 p.m. daylight time or Eastern Daylight Time on the 1st of March at Coda.
Fantastic. And guys, check out the Player One socials. You'll be able to find all the information, all the links and everything attached there through our Facebook and through Twitter and also the Insta and on the website itself.
Yeah.
Slammer, just one final question from me to wrap things up. What are the long-term plans for this?
Right. Well, the long-term plans, I've got an end goal in my mind. And look, for now, if I talk about this season and this iteration of the game, there are a couple of one-off events. Now, we are talking to people about trying to get let's call it an expanded one-off event at the end of this cycle.
Yep.
But that's sort of all in discussion for now. Ideally, what I'd love to see is for it to become like a 3 or 4 race series through the cycle or through a seasonal cycle. We know the seasons, normally the leagues run between through the second half of the year, H2, and then H1 of the following year. So if we can get like a 3 or 4 round cycle within that within July to December, and then another one from January to June until then the next game comes out, rather than it being a one-off, then it could be like an accumulative points. Because here it's not an individual, like the individual winner, there's a bit of glory to it, but it's all league related. It's the league team's points that counts at the end.
Sounds a bit to me like we've got the Australasian or Oceania World Championship taking place by the sounds of things, which is positive. And I love that you've matched up and that you've got to come in from a team perspective, not just as an individual. I think that's a massive thing too. That, to me, that was the most important thing. It's like, and I said it in the opening message I sent to some of the admins that I knew back, early November, when it was sort of a glimmer in the eye, that I'm doing nothing I don't want to step on any league's toes at all. I don't want to get in their way. I want to work with and around what you guys do, on a daily basis and do bloody well. So I'm not here, no competition, there's nothing like that. I want to try and promote your leagues. I want to try and get everyone to see and hear and know about leagues that I never knew of. I'll be honest, I never knew of AFR beforehand. I never heard of them.
Sure.
They won, and they won in a canter as well, didn't they? Yeah. We had people say, no, you got to watch out for these guys. But I'm hoping that teams or leagues like AFR now will get out there, and people that are on PC go and have a look at them, guys, or any of the other teams that are involved. They're all great communities. I'm not going to get communities in that I know nothing about or have got bad reputations or whatever it might be. I'm going to keep some form of invitational to it, and I really only want to invite the people that I think deserve to be in. So we've got a couple of new leagues that have joined us this year. One dropped out, and we've got a couple of new ones that have joined us, and both great leagues as well. That's the great thing, I think, also for the punter at home that is interested in getting into the sport. This gives them a beautiful example of what leagues are out there that they could potentially join. Slammer, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. No problem at all. Thanks for having me, guys.
Mate, no worries at all. And hey, look, if you need a solid academy level driver to step in, all right, just give me a shout. I'm easily in the top 60 or so of the drivers on our league, so I'll just wait for the call up, shall I?
Yeah, you can wait for the call up, or just speak to your relevant admins, mate. I think you're represented in here, aren't you?
Sure. I might need to put in some more lap times, I think, first. But mate, look, thank you so much. We can't wait to check out the event. And look, Player One is super stoked to be on board helping out as well.
Thanks, mate. I really appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Well, it's that time of the week again where we take a look at a new product that's come onto the market and is going to enhance what you're doing. And today we're going to look at one that I think is going to revolutionise, particularly for those that are into iRacing. Neil, this one is all about shifting to a new level, if you'll excuse the pun.
I love it. Solid shifter pun. Now, look, and this one, it's not a particularly new product, but it's very new to me. And so what I've done is, so those of you who have checked out the YouTube page, you'll see that there is a new sort of review video up for the V&M dual sequential and H-pattern shifter. So V&M are a Vietnamese company. They came on the scene a couple of years ago, producing really good quality, really well built, I guess very mechanical hardware, and it's completely changed the way I interact with my sim. So I'd always come up, like a lot of us, I started out on Logitech gear back in the day and using paddle shifters. And then as I moved, obviously focused heavily on Formula One racing initially when I started out sim racing, and of course paddle shifters are key. And then as I progressed over into other platforms like R-Factor and Assetto and then onto iRacing, I just continued to use the paddle shifters because I was used to them and they sort of felt comfortable. And my true love has now become V8 racing and iRacing. As you know, HK, I'm always rabbiting onto you about it.
Absolutely. Mate. And this one, a shifter, well, it's what they've got in the real cars. And that can be really tricky to get your head around too, it's got to be said.
Yeah, look, it's such a quintessential part of the V8 experience is that having to take one hand off the wheel and manually change through the gears. And when I first tried the V&M shifter, I kind of thought that it would feel like a bit of a novelty. I thought, all right, I'll give it a go for the review purposes. I want to give it a really good run for its money. But I always thought that I personally would go back to paddle shifters, so I was just really used to them. But I couldn't have been more wrong. This thing has completely changed the way I feel about sim racing, and particularly in a car, something like the V8s. But even for GTs now, I'm going to continue using it because what it did is it gave me another way to physically provide a mechanical input into this virtual racing car that I'm sitting in. And the V&M shifter is amazing because it's got a really strong, robust, mechanical, like engineered feeling to it. And when you bite down through the gears, you can really feel that crunch and you feel like you're actually influencing the engine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and my thought process is if you're going to do simulation games like these, you want to be immersed in it. You want it to be as close as the real thing, and it is. And it's a thing in a real V8 supercar, even a Carrera Cup car. You don't treat them with love. You smack it in, and you've got that mechanical feel about it. So you're saying that simulates both.
Yeah, very much so. I even turned up the haptic feedback for aligned to gear changes for me. So now when I grab hold of the shifter and I crank down through the gears, you feel a vibration up through the haptic feedback through the butt kickers into my seat. You feel the crunch in your hand as you're changing the gears. And it was, I literally was smiling for the first sort of hour and a half I was racing around in the sim at just how much fun it was. And then critically, I stopped noticing I was doing it, and my lap time started to improve as well. I started to find that I was going quicker and quicker, and I actually set a new personal best around Bathurst within about 30 minutes of switching over to the sequential. Now, I don't think the sequential necessarily was the reason, but it certainly didn't slow me down at all, and it became second nature really quickly. Like I stopped having to think about it, and then also I actually think it allowed me to change down, it improved my gear changes because I wasn't, in Formula One, how you just sort of smash the pedals as you go into a heavy braking corner.
Yeah.
Well, what this had, I was doing the same thing in the V8s, and I was often over gearing down. I think I was either going one too many, or I was gearing down too quickly, and then throwing the braking off by getting some of that, that engine traction that you get when you click into the new gears.
Yeah.
This allowed me to stop doing that so much. I became more conscious of the gear I was in and making sure I was in the right gear going around the corners. And I've worked out pretty quickly that I was actually carrying more speed through the corners because I was having more focus on the act of changing gears.
Wow. So I suppose it does make sense, even if the gear changing itself doesn't make it doesn't equate to a quicker lap time. The ability to be able to just get into a flow allows you to find that time, because, as you say, you're no longer concentrating on the gear shifts per se, but more on the line that you're taking into the turn, the amount of braking, and how quickly you're changing down the gears.
Yeah, completely right. So, look, I thoroughly recommend it. If you haven't tried a sequential or an H-pattern shifter on your rig, I thoroughly recommend giving it a go. It's fun more than anything else, but it's just adds a whole new layer of how you can connect and feel attached to the machinery of the racing car that you're piloting. So, yeah, thoroughly recommend them. Check out the Player One YouTube. You'll see our review there of the VRS shifter. And look, there's a lot of great shifters out there, absolutely. We're going to continue to review more of them. So this first one was just taking a look at like one of the market leaders at the moment, a really great dual H-pattern and sequential shifter. We run through that in detail. It's as I said, it's touching a lot on just the act of purchasing your first shifter and giving that a go. And then definitely tune in. There'll be more reviews coming. We're going to look at some of the Magic shifters and look at a bunch more as well. There's a great sequential shifter as well from Thrustmaster that we're going to take a look at too.
And what are the price ranges of the shifters? Just ballpark.
Yeah, look, so they vary a little bit depending. They're around that sort of 400 to 500 mark is about where they sit.
Yeah.
Some of the more, you can get sort of more entry-level ones coming around the 300 mark, and then you can get the ones with all the bells and whistles and LEDs that sort of get up into the 650 mark as well.
Well, there it is, episode number 2 of Sim Stuff. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. They'll be coming out far more regularly now, so stand by to have your podcast inbox absolutely smashed. We'll look forward to catching up with you for episode number 3. Bye for now.